Imagine waking up every day feeling like you're always late, even when there is nothing else to do, as if life were constantly racing, and you were always a few steps behind. Now let me ask you a simple but uncomfortable question. And if your biggest tiredness doesn't come from what you haven't done yet, but from the excess of what are you already trying to do? We live believing that moving forward requires pressure, that growing requires continuous effort, that achieving requires constant sacrifice. And so, without realizing it, we turn life into a silent battlefield, where rest becomes guilt, pause becomes fear, and silence becomes a waste of time. But observe nature for a moment. No tree grows in a hurry. No river speeds up to reach the sea. No season forces your arrival early. And yet, everything happens. So why do we believe we need to do more, run more, insist more, to finally live better? Maybe because we were taught to confuse movement with progress. Maybe because we learned that stopping is dangerous. Or maybe because we forgot something essential. There are forces that only act when we stop to interfere. This video is not about laziness. It's not about giving up. And it's definitely not about abandoning your dreams. It's about something much more subtle and much more powerful, the art of doing less, and yet allowing more to happen. There is a type of action that is born from silence, a type of decision that arises when the mind is not at war, and a type of result that only appears when you stop forcing your way. Few people talk about it, because that doesn't sell urgency, don't shout promises, does not stimulate anxiety. But those who discover this principle are rarely able to return to the old way of living. If you feel, even without knowing how to explain it, that there is something in your life that requires less effort and more alignment, if you have the feeling that you are trying too hard and living too little, so stay here. Maybe this isn't just another video. Maybe it's a silent invitation to see where you're wasting energy, and where life could flow on its own. If this restlessness has already awakened something in you, follow me until the end. Sometimes, this single idea completely changes the way we walk. And now, reflect with me, because in the next block, we will begin to dismantle one of the greatest illusions of modern life. What if overexertion is not a sign of strength, but of misalignment? What exactly made us believe that the more we do, the more we are worth? There is a silent belief that governs much of our lives. If it's difficult, it's because it's working. If it hurts, it's because it's worth it. If you get tired, it's because we're on the right path. This idea seeps in early. She appears at school when we learn that only those who deserve recognition deserve recognition. Pushes beyond the limit. She grows stronger at work when being always busy becomes synonymous with importance. And it solidifies in adult life when rest starts to seem like a luxury that needs to be deserved. The problem is that we almost never stop to question this logic. How many times have you insisted on something just because giving up felt like failure? How many times did you keep pushing a situation even though you felt that something wasn't flowing? More. How many times have you confused persistence with stubbornness and effort with exhaustion? Modern life has trained us to believe that everything needs to be conquered by force. Relationships, recognition, success, until happiness. And so we accumulate tasks, goals, obligations, expectations, as if carrying more weight makes us more valuable, as if tiredness were an invisible medal. But look honestly, the more you try to control every detail, the more anxious you feel. The more you charge, the less satisfaction you experience. The more force you apply, the more resistance you encounter. That's because excessive effort isn't usually born out of clarity, it's born out of fear. Fear of losing, fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough. So we do more. We talk more. We plan more. We react more. And without realizing it, we start to live in constant tension, like someone who swims against the current believing that stopping would mean sinking. But there is a simple truth that is rarely told. Not every effort generates progress. Some efforts just keep you busy, not moving. Think about how many decisions you make just to ease the feeling of uncertainty. Not because they are necessary, but because standing still seems unbearable. The silence is uncomfortable. The pause is scary. Not knowing causes anxiety. Then we fill each space with action. The curious thing is that when we look back, many of the most important moments in life, they didn't happen because we forced something. They happened when we were open. Pay attention. Gifts. Ideas emerge when the mind relaxes. Answers appear when we stop insisting. Paths reveal themselves when we let go of the need for control absolute. Yet we remain trapped in the illusion that more effort always leads to more results. Maybe because we were taught to measure value by quantity. More hours, more production, more sacrifice. But life doesn't work like a machine. It functions like a living organism. And organisms don't respond well to constant pressure. They need rhythm, pause, of balance. When we ignore this, we start to feel tired before the day even begins. Always running, but not knowing exactly where. Always busy, but rarely at peace. And here an uncomfortable question arises. Are we really moving forward? Or are we just moving so as not to face the void? In the next block, we will dismantle an even bigger mess. The one that makes many people believe that doing less is synonymous with giving up. But before proceeding, reflect honestly. How many things in your life do you keep forcing just for fear of letting go? What if part of your fatigue comes not from a lack of effort, but from too much of it? At some point in life, we learn to fear the word less. Less effort, less control, less action. It sounds like loss, like retreat, like failure in disguise. But this association is one of the biggest distortions we carry. Doing less is not abandoning. It's not crossing your arms. It's not about settling for little. In fact, doing less is stopping wasting energy where it never went necessary. There is a profound difference between not acting and acting at the wrong time, between giving up and insisting on something that has lost its meaning, between laziness and wisdom. Nature never does more than it needs. A tree doesn't try to grow in winter. A river doesn't push the mountain, it goes around it. The wind doesn't fight space, it simply passes through it. None of this is passive. All of this is extremely efficient. The problem is that we have been taught to act even when there is no clarity, deciding even when the body asks for a break, talking even when silence would do better. And then we confuse doing less with weakness, when in fact it is a sign of inner refinement. Think about how many times you insisted on a conversation that only increased the conflict, in a plan that no longer made sense, on a path that required more and more effort, and delivered less and less return. Doing less in these moments would not be giving up. It would be understandable. Realize that not every door opens with force, that some only reveal themselves when you stop pushing. There is a type of intelligence that doesn't scream, doesn't run, doesn't impose itself. She watches, she waits, she feels the right moment. This intelligence understands that correct action does not depend on intensity, but on alignment. When we are out of alignment, any action weighs heavily. When we are aligned, even the effort seems light. That's why there are days when you do little, and everything flows, and others where you do a lot, and nothing happens. It's not quantity. It is a quality of presence. Doing less also means letting go of the need to prove something. Prove that you are capable, that you deserve, that you are in control. Much of our fatigue comes from this constant attempt at invisible validation, as if someone was always watching, as if stopping would mean being judged. But life doesn't demand spectacle. It responds to coherence. When you do less of what is unnecessary, there is space. Space to perceive signals, space to listen to intuition, space for solutions to emerge without being forced. This less does not create a negative void. It creates fertile space. It is in space that creativity appears. It is in the interval that understanding matures. It is in the pause that the next step reveals itself. And perhaps this is the hardest thing to accept. The more you try to guarantee the result, the further away it becomes. Not because life is cruel, but because it doesn't respond well to constant tension. Doing less means trusting that not everything depends on your direct intervention, that there is a greater rhythm happening, and resisting it only creates wear and tear. In the next block, we will talk about something even more uncomfortable for the modern mind: the pause, not like superficial rest, but as a profound act of intelligence and inner power. Before proceeding, reflect calmly. What in your life would continue to exist, or even improve, if you stopped force? What if doing less wasn't wasting time, but finally getting on time? There is something we avoid almost all the time: the real pause. Not that distracted pause, filled with screens, noises, and racing thoughts, but the real pause. The one in which nothing happens on the outside, so that something finally can happen inside. The pause is scary because it brings us face to face with what we avoid feeling. When we stop, the noise subsides, and in the silence, questions arise that can no longer be ignored. Therefore, we learn to occupy each space, every minute, every breath. We think that always doing something is a sign of vitality, but often it's just escape. The pause is not the absence of movement. It's a different kind of action. An invisible, silent, profound action. Observe your breathing. It only works because there is inspiration and pause, contraction and pause, expansion and pause. Without the break, there isn't enough oxygen. Without the break, the body collapses. The same happens with the mind. When you never stop, you start living on automatic. React without realizing it. Decide without feeling. He walks without knowing why. Pausing interrupts this cycle. It creates a gap between the stimulus and the response. And in that interval, there lives something precious: choice. This is where you stop reacting out of habit and start acting out of awareness. Many answers we desperately seek do not come from effort, but from attentive rest. They do not appear when we force a conclusion, but when we open space for it emerges alone. Think about how many times a solution appeared when you stopped thinking about the problem, or an idea came up in the shower, or a clarity came during an aimless walk. This is no coincidence. It's natural functioning. The mind needs space to organize what it already knows. When you press it all the time, it makes noise. When you respect it, it aligns. The pause also restores our sensitivity. We feel our bodies better. We understand the signs better. We recognize limits before they turn into exhaustion. But we have been taught to ignore this. Afterwards, even when tired. Overcoming warning signs. Believing that stopping is losing advantage. However, those who never pause end up losing direction. The break doesn't take time away from life. It gives back quality time. She doesn't delay the path. She corrects the route. When you consciously pause, you begin to notice where you are wasting energy without return. You begin to see commitments that no longer make sense. Conversations that could be simpler. Efforts that could be abandoned without guilt. The break doesn't solve everything immediately, but it creates clarity. And clarity changes everything. She also teaches something difficult for the modern ego. Not everything needs your constant intervention. There are processes that adjust themselves. There are situations that mature over time. There are answers that only come when you stop pressing. Pausing is an act of trust. Confidence that the world won't fall apart if you stop for a moment. Confidence that you don't need to control everything for things to keep happening. When you incorporate pause into your life, you begin to act more precisely. Less impulses, less waste, less wear, and paradoxically, more results. In the next block, we will touch on something even more sensitive: the control. This constant need to guarantee the future, predict everything, hold every thread, and how it may be stealing exactly the harmony you are looking for. Before moving on, let these questions resonate with you. What have you avoided feeling by never really stopping? What if the pause you fear is exactly the space where clarity is waiting? There is a silent impulse that governs many of our decisions: the need for control. Control the time, control results, control people, control the future. We believe that if we can anticipate everything, nothing will go wrong. That if we think hard enough, we will avoid pain. That if we keep everything under surveillance, we can finally relax. But something curious happens. The more we try to control life, the more tense we become. Control comes from fear. Fear of the unexpected. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of losing something that we believe is essential. So we plan too much. We review too much. We worry too much. And we call that responsibility. But observe sincerely how much of this control actually works. You can plan a conversation, but you can't control how the other person will react. You can plan a career, but you can't control every change along the way. You can plan the future, but not control the weather. Yet we resist accepting this. Control gives us the illusion of security. But it comes at a high price. Constant anxiety, accumulated tension, and a permanent feeling of alert. It's like holding something so tight that you end up hurting yourself. Harmony arises when we understand that control is not synonymous with care. Caring is being present. Controlling is trying to dominate what doesn't depend on you. When you let go of the grip a little, something unexpected happens. The body relaxes. The mind slows down. Decisions become clearer, not because you gave up on living well, but because he stopped fighting against what he cannot change. Think of a river. He doesn't control the terrain. Don't pick every stone. Don't plan every turn. Even so, it reaches the sea. He adapts. He gets around it. He follows. When you encounter an obstacle, you don't panic. Don't force passage. It changes shape. In life, we insist on staying in shape, even when the path requires adaptation. We want everything to follow the original plan, even when the moment calls for another direction. This creates frustration, and frustration breeds more control, a silent wear cycle. Letting go of control does not mean living in chaos. It means accepting that there is a healthy limit between what you can influence and what you need to allow. You can choose your attitudes. You can take care of your intentions. You can act with integrity. But it cannot guarantee results. When this distinction becomes clear, something profoundly changes. You keep doing what needs to be done, but without rigidity, no despair, without the feeling that everything depends solely on you. Harmony is born at this point. It is not the absence of problems. It is the absence of unnecessary resistance. It's the ability to act when it's time to act, and backing down when you insist would only create wear and tear. Less control also means trusting the process of life more, not blind trust, but calm trust. The confidence that not everything needs to be resolved now, that some things organize themselves over time, that the next step reveals itself when you are attentive, not tense. When you let go of excessive control, you begin to notice opportunities that were previously went unnoticed. Start listening more, to watch more, responding instead of reacting. And that changes everything. Life stops being a constant struggle and becomes a dialogue. You act, she responds, and you adjust the path. In the next block, we will bring all of this to the ground in real life. Not as theory, but as simple practice. How to live by doing less, without losing direction. How to let go without getting lost. How to act lightly in a world that demands so much. Before proceeding, reflect honestly. What in your life are you trying to control out of fear, not necessity? Real? What if some of the peace you seek only comes when you loosen the reins a little more? So far, everything may sound nice, deep, inspiring. But there is a silent question that arises in the mind. How does this work in real life? Because doing less is not avoiding responsibilities. It's not abandoning commitments. It's not living adrift. It's changing how you move within what already exists. It all starts with something simple but rare: discernment. Discern what requires action and what only requires presence. Much of our burnout comes from reacting to everything as if it were urgent. We respond to messages unnecessarily. We accept commitments on impulse. We make decisions to alleviate anxiety, not because they are the best. Doing less means learning to pause before responding, before saying yes, before explaining too much. It's realizing that not every demand deserves your immediate energy. In practice, this can start small, decreasing the rate of response, allowing yourself not to resolve everything at the same moment, accepting that some things can wait and get better for that reason. Another essential point is to simplify expectations. Many of the goals we carry were not born from a true desire, but from comparison, from external pressure, from an idea of what we should be. When you lower these artificial expectations, something changes. Life gets lighter, the clearest choices, the body less tense. Doing less also means choosing better where to put effort. Not everything deserves the same intensity. Not all battles need to be fought. Not all paths need to be taken. There is strength in knowing how to retreat. There is intelligence in not insisting. There is maturity in abandoning what has already fulfilled its role. Another fundamental aspect is to reduce mental excess. We think too much. We analyze too much. We create scenarios that will never happen. Much of this isn't planning, it's concern in disguise. When you do less mentally, you have internal space left over. And in this space, intuition begins to speak louder. Decisions become simpler. The body responds more clearly. Doing less is also learning to trust the next step without demanding to see the way entire. Life rarely reveals itself all at once. It shows itself in parts. When you accept this, you stop wasting yourself trying to predict everything. Act on what is within reach, and it allows the rest to organize itself. There is a silent peace in this way of living, a feeling of alignment, as if you were finally moving with time and not against it. And here comes something important. If you've come this far, something inside you has already recognized this truth. Therefore, I want to invite you to do something simple but powerful. In the comments, respond honestly. What is the one thing in your life that you feel like you could let go of today, but still didn't let go? You don't need to explain everything. Just naming it is an act of clarity. When you write this, you stop being just a spectator. You begin to participate in the change itself. In the next and final block, we will close this journey. Not with definitive answers, but with a reflection that can continue to echo long after the video ends. Before proceeding, reflect. What changes when you stop fighting? Is it the present moment? And who do you become when you no longer need to prove anything to anyone? Perhaps the greatest relief in life is not achieving something new, but to stop carrying what was never yours to support. For a long time, you believed you needed to hold everything back, that letting go meant losing, that relaxing was risky, that doing less was going backwards. But now you start to notice something different. Lightness does not come from the absence of responsibilities. It arises from the absence of unnecessary resistance. When you do less than doesn't matter, there is energy left over for what really transforms. When you let go of excessive control, life stops being a constant test, and it becomes a living experience. You start walking without dragging invisible weights, to decide without constant fear of error, acting without needing to prove anything. And then something silent happens. Things start to fall into place with less effort, not because you did more, but because it stopped disturbing the natural flow of the path. Life does not require haste. She responds to presence, does not require rigidity. It thrives on adaptation, does not require constant force. It reveals itself in the intelligence of knowing when to act and when to simply allow it. Maybe you don't need to change everything. Maybe it just needs to slow down. Reduce billing, decrease the noise, reduce invented urgency, and trust. Trust that you are not late. Trust that the next step appears when you are attentive. Trust that there is wisdom in the rhythm that life is already offering. If this video brought you that feeling of silent clarity, so this wasn't just content, it was a reminder. Subscribe to the channel and continue walking with us through this space where least weight creates more meaning, and where living stops being a struggle and becomes presence. And before you go, take this question with you. Not to answer now, but to feel throughout the days. What if what you call destiny is just the moment when you finally stopped resisting the flow that always been guiding you? Maybe life has never asked for more effort. Maybe she was just waiting, that you learned to do less.